It's my pleasure to welcome you to Business Trends for today with me, Tolu Ajayi. Watch Business Trends at this time. The Nigerian Stock Exchange, in collaboration with Bloomberg Markets, hosted the 2017 CEO Roundtable focusing on the theme Innovating Out of Nigeria's Recession, Exploring New Paradigm for Nigeria's Economic Growth. Giving his opening remarks, the CEO of the NSE, Oscar Onyema, shared the essence of the roundtable.
The idea is that Bloomberg, given its global reach and its knowledge of worldwide trends, brings insights which, when paired with our domestic insights, will provide Nigerian businesses and policymakers with requisite knowledge to properly anticipate trends that will affect the Nigerian economy and position us to extract value. Our collaboration with Bloomberg to hold a yearly CEO Roundtable was born out of the need to bring leaders from various sectors of the economy to discuss and proffer solutions to pertinent issues affecting their sectors and examine global trends applicable to them. The Nigerian Stock Exchange continues to position itself not only to be a credible platform for raising capital, but to be a hub for innovative and creative ideas. For example, we've introduced a few initiatives such as the Green Bond and federal government savings bonds into the market. We have automated the mechanism for trading rights issues on the exchange and continue to work towards the launch of exchange-traded derivatives.
Doyin Salami, notable Nigerian economist, in his economic roundup, gave insights into the critical issues that needs to be addressed in the economic space.
No matter how the economy, how the global environment changes, even into our favor, unless we are in a position where our labor force is actually fit for purpose, where our labor force is actually productive, then we will not find that our people will be part of any economic growth. And yet, for me, it's important that Nigeria does the following, or Nigeria achieves the following: growth, sustainable, sustained, but at the heart of it, inclusive. Growth, but it must be sustained, it must be sustainable, but at the heart of it, it must be inclusive.
In our keynote presentation on Nigeria's growth narrative, Finance Minister Kemi Adeosun assured stakeholders the government was resolute and unwavering in driving its revenue base to put the nation back on the path of growth.
Our low tax to GDP ratio compares negatively with our other countries. Ghana is at 16%. South Africa is at 27%. The OECD average is 34%. So if we want to grow, we must address this issue and do so aggressively. And to do so, we will have to step on some big toes. And we will need to step on them hard. But we really have no choice. For the size of government we have, for the size of country we have, for the needs we have, government revenue is simply too low. Fairness demands that those who have more must carry their fair share of the tax burden. And so to this end, for the last 15 months, we have engaged in a huge data gathering exercise. We've engaged one of the world's leading global investigation agencies, and we have traced funds that originated in Nigeria to all parts of the world. The illicit flow of funds out of Nigeria harms our nation. It deprives us of essential funds and those same funds are then used to finance development in other nations. This must stop. As a government, we recognise that bringing up the issue of tax will automatically bring up the issue of service delivery and good governance, and we welcome that dialogue because it is an important part of the social contract that any taxpayer has the right to demand. In that regard, you have the full assurance that the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration is committed to best value in expenditure of government monies, eradicating corruption and driving Nigeria's growth. More efficient revenue mobilization and blocking leakages is also an important financing strategy. And I'm sure you're aware of the controversies about the amount of money that we're using to service our debt at the moment. The solution is revenue. If we have more revenue, we will borrow less. If we have more revenue, our debt service to revenue ratio will improve. So the solution to the problem is not to reduce our debt. At this point in time, we have no choice. We must borrow to fund our infrastructure. The solution to the problem is to increase our revenue, and that we are doing. A growing economy focusing on the areas where we have comparative advantage with a strong focus on infrastructure and an improved ease of doing business is a very clear recipe for growth, profit and progress. And so as I begin to close, I will end where I started. May your road be rough. Our road has been rough, but I believe that as a nation we have learned our lessons well. Nigerians are extremely fast learners. We know what we need to do to get this economy moving. We know the potential we have. It's really now time for us to act. Nigeria is doing more with less, and we will continue to do so. Growth is gradually returning. Investor confidence, I'm happy to see, is reawakening. And that confidence is based on an economic blueprint, which if we follow doggedly, will take us from that rough road onto a path of sustainable growth.
The NSE CEO speaks further on the roundtable and policies in place to attract private investments.
I think that co-investment is the way to go. You get your dollars or your naira to go a lot further. And so mapping out the critical projects that are going to be catalytic in nature and getting other co-investors, both from development partners and the private sector, probably would drive the growth. We note that corporate governance is important, transparency and accountability, and we think that the stock exchange gives you that kind of platform that imposes those kinds of disciplines. So having a number of these projects financed through the capital markets, financed from an equity perspective, will also be something that we would be very much in support of. You know that policy shifted in the last 5 to 6 weeks around accessibility of FX for investors and exporters, and that has made it attractive for us to see the kind of inflows that we're seeing. The equity market is a forward indicator of economic activities, and so what you're seeing in the equity markets is really an indicator. People are buying on the belief that the economy is going to turn positive and that we're going to begin to see growth. And what we need to understand is that both foreign and domestic investors want the same thing. You invest money, you want to make money out of it. And you want to be able to access that money when you've made it. And so really, in order to make the investments sustainable, even through downturns, we have to be consistent with policy, and we have to create policies that facilitate those kinds of transactions, allowing market forces to really determine prices, price discovery, and the allocation of resources. The final thing I want to say is, if we want to make sure that foreign portfolio investors continue to stay invested through downturns in an environment, in a global environment where capital is highly fungible, people can easily move from country to country, we have to make sure that it is easy to do business in Nigeria. We have to make sure that we are highly competitive in our industries, in the returns that we provide for investors, both domestic and foreign. And finally, we need to make sure that the buffers are built in, so that in situations of high returns and high growth rates, that we're creating solid buffers, so that when you go through down cycles, it is not, the shock is highly moderated and therefore easier for investors to go through.
With the challenges of unemployment and productivity in the country, a strategic public-private partnership framework from the government becomes imperative to attract private investment that stimulate the economy. The event also featured a panel session with Andrew Ali, CEO Africa Finance Corporation, Funke Okweke, CEO Milwon Cable, Demola Shogule, CEO Stanbic IBTC, Dr. Graham Heifer, MD Okumo Oil Palm, Ngozi Adibi, CEO Outsiding HR, and Mark Bolland, Senior Economist, Africa and the Middle East, Bloomberg Intelligence, as discussants. You're watching Business Trends. Friday on the program, I brought you an interview with the President of Nigeria British Chamber of Commerce, Prince Adedapo Adelekun, as he speaks to issues around economic resurgence and prosperity. Sit back and let's enjoy the remaining part of that interview. Now, how do you think Nigerian regulators, how do you think they can enhance financial services?
Well, you're doing regulation in financial services. That's the central bank. Because if we're talking of financial services, it's a specialized industry. It's the banks are regulated by SEC regulates also the finance investment banks and things like that. And I think Nigeria is probably one of the most over-regulated banking or financial society. I mean, if you speak to bank MDs, they will tell you the amount of time and the amount of resources that banks dedicate, to dealing with the number of reports, the number of filings that have a central bank. So I think if it's in terms of regulation, I think we have global standards within our regulatory system. And you can also see the quality of a banking services and a financial services. There are world standards. There is an international finance. There's a lot of money coming in. Okay? The only challenge that they have is the fact that the fundings that are being put together, TSA for example, the funds in the pension funds, needs to be accessible to allow borrowings and lendings to the SME. Because this country is 70% business is SME. And without SME, capacitation, financing, jobs cannot be created and sustained, and the rural urban migration will not be abated. And don't forget also that the large corporations that are also coming in will need the SMEs to feed on them and to service them. So there's a correlation between financial liquidity, capital liquidity adequacy for the banks, and development of the SME. And that also have impact on job creation, and the rural urban migration. So there's a value chain, and I think in terms of regulation, yes, I think we're doing very, very well. What the banks require is government to release some of all the TSAs back again into the banking sector with specific instruction of lending modalities, exchange, what's it called, interest rates. Okay? If you give it to them at zero interest rate, they may not, you tell them you don't do more than 5%. And things will change. So that is what we do not have. But in terms of regulation of a financial sector, I think we are world class.
Bode Augusto, the chairman of the Lagos State Economic Advisory Committee, recently said the problem really is not about the nation's exchange rate, but the policy itself. Do you share the sentiment?
Well, yes and no. Policy, like I said, must be contextualized. When you're in a war situation, your strategy is different from a peace situation. Nigeria is at an economic war. Even though we have our own political, skirmishes, it's not as serious as the economic climate that the country is. So policies are made in the context of the current situation. We're in desperate situations. We can't throw the dirty water away with the baby. We must take the baby out of it. So yes, I agree that we can't have a fixated policy formulation, and you can see that the government and central bank have been amenable and flexible to forces of the market, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But exchange rate itself, like I said, is due to mass demand. If we're an import-dependent society and 70% of everything we do is export, the demand for dollars will outstrip the supply. How much earnings are we making from dollars, from oil? And once supply is lower than demand, you're going to have what? Increase in the cost of purchase of dollars. So until a country exports and earns more dollars than it requires, you cannot be talking about exchange rate. It's not in your control. But what's your control are policies to manage those challenges, and that's what the central bank is doing. And I think that one of the other things that needs to be done very quickly is to begin to look at globalizing our regional economies. Because indeed, one of the challenges is the fact that as a country, our brand is at its lowest ebb globally. So the cost of investment is high, the cost of transaction is high when it comes to Nigeria. But when you look at the subnationals, take Lagos for example, I would tell you that if Lagos is doing business transaction globally, the cost will be cheaper than Nigeria. So if the country begins to adopt a situation through some form of economic devolution and encourage our city-states like Lagos or regional groups to begin to project themselves globally as part of Nigeria, but also independent economically, you will then begin to see traction in the kind of inflows that are coming. And if inflow begins to increase for Lagos, that will definitely impact the whole country. Because it's the only subnational where every Nigerian of ethnic tribe can achieve their aspiration, and are currently doing. So I would say that the economic revival of Nigeria is dependent on the economic viability of Lagos. Okay, so that's a discussion for another day.
Okay, let's round it up. Finally, as a chamber, what vision are you advocating for the Nigerian economy?
It's been articulated. Everything I've said to you all morning is not my personal view. It is the view of the various trade committees, various subcommittees in the chamber. Almost every other month we have summits, we have roundtables, we bring government officials from all the sectors, oil and gas. I just told you of the NIPC director, executive secretary that we took to London. We also on that trip took also the Minister of Mines and Solid Minerals. And we also took the Shippers Council in Liverpool, speaking to maritime investors about deep sea ports, about inland ports across the country, and how the inland ports can be transformed into economic clusters across Nigeria. About investment and technology into our solid minerals so that extraction can be 21st century. The minister was with us, okay? NIPC to speak to ease of doing business. So we are basically a platform, a pipeline between Nigeria and the United Kingdom in terms of policy formulation, in terms of growth, in terms of trade, and we advise, we have policy statements. So we're not shy at all of our responsibilities, and we have serious opinion on activities of government. We support the efforts of the government. We appreciate the challenges, but we're saying Nigeria needs a grand vision, a renewal and transformation strategy, and bold symbolic steps, locally and internationally, to get us out of the woods.
President, Nigeria British Chamber of Commerce, Prince Adedele, I want to thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with me.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you very much. Finally, on business trends today, the Nigeria Customs Service, FOU Zone A Ikeja, Wednesday in Lagos, says it intercepted various contrabands with a duty paid value of 607.7 million naira. We'll bring you the report. The Nigeria Customs Service, FOU Zone A Ikeja, Wednesday in Lagos, says it intercepted various contraband with a cumulative duty paid value of 607.7 million naira between the month of April 1st to June 12, 2017. Controller, FOU Zone A Ikeja, Controller Mohammed Uba Garba, stated this during a press briefing in Lagos. It described the seizure as significant.
And above all, the unit intercepted 384 parcels of Indian hemp concealed in 6 bales of second-hand clothing from Ghana along Yanapaja Road, based on information. In the spirit of inter-agency relationship, the suspect and the content will be handed over to NDLA for prosecution in a court of competent jurisdiction.
Comptroller Garba says items intercepted include vegetable oil, foreign parboiled rice, frozen poultry products, smuggled vehicles, Indian hemp, used tires and logs of unprocessed rough wood ready for export, as well as various general merchandise.
These people, in their documentation, they declare auto parts, which is brutal. Now, they bring in battery. Instead of declaring battery as per documentation, it's just like what I told you. Government you have to give government correct records. Now, wherever they went and did their documentation documentation will also read auto parts. That is the record of statistics, the Bureau of Statistics by the government. That's what you'll be reading. But in reality, you find that they are the imported battery. So you know it's giving government a problem. It's giving government false impression. They are giving government false record, and that will affect government life.
Comptroller Garba, while thanking the leadership of the Nigeria Customs Service for motivation and support, reiterated the readiness of the agency to continue its partnership with the media. He also promised to improve on its anti-smuggling operations. That's Business Trends today. Many thanks for watching. Let's have your thoughts and comments using our social media platforms right there on your screen. I am Tolu, Ajayi. Let's keep faith in the Nigerian economy and keep buying made in Nigeria goods.